Welcome to the Wonder of Woo podcast, where we highlight how businesses can scale profitably by serving others well. I'm Daryl Zavadny.
And I'm Ed Howie.
And this is
the Wonder of Woo. If you're a business owner investing time, money, and marketing only to be frustrated by losing customers, then this podcast is for you.
Ed, we again have the privilege of sitting with our friend Delise Simmons. And
Round
two. We had so much good stuff in round one with Delise. We just needed to come back and learn more sitting with Delise. So as we get started, Delise, can you share, for those of our community maybe who have not yet had the privilege of listening to our first episode with you, maybe share a little bit of the vocational highlights, your big stopping points, so that we can at least kind of contextualize our conversation.
Okay. Great. I started in 1989 at Southwest Airlines, cut my corporate teeth there out of college, and had the opportunity to help create and run the Southwest Airlines University for People, which became the Leadership University. Mm-hmm. In that capacity, there was we ran about 1,000 managers and leaders through leadership training every year. And then I left Southwest in 1997, was invited by a former board member, a couple of others, and I were invited to start a competitive startup. And we launched the largest mega startup in commercial aviation history, which you guys know as JetBlue.
JetBlue.
Yeah, and in our last episode, we explored, why would Jeff laugh? But I get it. So listen to that episode if you haven't listened to it.
All right.
Okay, so then Southwest, JetBlue. And
the frustration with my career was I knew that what we did mattered and it made sense and it worked, but I couldn't prove it. So I connected with a couple of gentlemen out of Kansas City at the time, and they had been studying employee sentiment and how that influences behavior and leadership behaviors and how that influences culture. And they had been culminating a bunch of data since 2009, and we took what we knew about working with people and what they knew about data and created the Culture Think Tank, where we're a research firm and we study how employees feel and we study what leaders need to do in order to improve culture.
Holy smokes. Well, I think it's safe to say, Ed, that Delise is an expert on culture, right?
Expert on culture. And what's great about the Culture Think Tank, and correct me if I say it wrong, but the two phrases that have stuck with me as we've worked with it and worked with Delise is that your business, your team, your enterprise is an organism. And it is either connecting or distancing, meaning everyone's either leaning in the right direction or they're pulling away. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah. And what we know, how an employee feels is important to us, not because we're chasing employee happiness, but we know that a frustrated employee is going to behave differently than a satisfied employee. Right? So if I understand how my employees are feeling, then I can predict what the culture is going to look like. Because culture, to us, our definition is culture is a collection of the behaviors of the people within a team or a group or an organization. So if it's a collection of behaviors, what that does is it takes away if people want to say, I don't know really what culture is, but I know it if I saw it, or I know it if it's good, or I know if it's bad. Well, what they're noticing are behaviors. How do we treat our workspace? Is it kept nice? Is it messy? That's a behavior that we're seeing. How are people talking to each other? How are they meeting us? All behaviors. It's not some, weird frou-frou science that we're trying to create. It's real. It's a behavioral science that says the way that people behave with each other is the culture.
And you've said many times, culture is behavior, behavior is culture. I've always said that the brand is your culture, is your behavior, is the brand and the culture. And so
they're interconnected. Yeah.
But what's interesting is that you just kind of subtly made a comment. It's not about employee happiness. That's a big myth breaker right there.
Yeah.
So let's explore it. What do you mean that culture has nothing to do really with employee happiness?
Culture to me is a completely a performance phenomenon. I want everything that we do with our culture is designed to help us perform better. If we want to get happy, get on a winning team.
So I love that.
Yeah.
So that I'm not chasing happiness. I'm going to allow the culture to drive the performance, which will then employees will be happy. But I also think happiness is kind of a choice. I can be in a great environment and choose not to be happy. So I want to think about, how do I make my employees feel connected? How do I make them feel safe? How do I make them feel like they matter? That they're important in the entire organization. And if I can encourage all of those behaviors, then they will perform, and our organization, that will be our competitive advantage in the marketplace.
Okay, so their feelings matter, but the byproduct of their feelings is not their feelings. The byproduct of their feelings is the behavior that is actually demonstrated.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I know you get this all the time, but obviously Southwest and JetBlue, two incredible brands, two incredible cultures, two distinct cultures. You could argue the success of the enterprise over time, better years here and there, all kinds of stuff going on in aviation, obviously. But one of those, you got to step into a culture and help basically propagate it to basically, she's already shared an episode. Previous episode, she talks about her love for cults. You definitely want to check that. But then with JetBlue, you sat down and basically architect and engineered what you wanted to ultimately become the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig into that a little bit. How do you, let's say for startups or even maybe restarts, what is it y'all did at JetBlue that could apply to any of us? How do you deliberately create culture?
Well, and I'm going to say you can't create a culture. I think you can create an environment like we talked about last time. You create an environment, and then the byproduct is the culture. So the reason I make that distinction is I can't come in and say the culture that worked at Southwest Airlines was really good, so we're going to presuppose that we're going to put that on your culture.
Copy paste, right?
Doesn't work, right?
Okay.
So we need to understand who are you now, and who is it that you want to become. So there's an aspirational quality to what these values are and who you are. But there's also a reality part of it. I can aspire to be a lot of things that I'm not ever going to be. So part of it is who I hire. I want to align that. And you have a culture of one. If you've got one or two people in your organization, whatever those behaviors are. So if I'm a solopreneur, culture of one is how do I respond to my vendors? How do I respond to my clients? How do I treat myself?
Right.
Part of if I treat myself well, the chances of me being able to treat others well goes up.
Well, that applies to all of us.
Yeah.
So no matter if you're a small organization or a large organization, it really becomes getting real about who we are and then who are we on our best day. So I see things in it kind of second iteration of values where younger employees, digital native employees, when they come into an organization now, the number one question they're asking in interviews is, tell me about your culture. Is it good? What can I rely on with your culture? And then they also want to see something beyond just how are we serving ourselves. They want to know how are we serving community?
Right.
How are we serving the environment? How are we serving the greater good? And that's kind of, we can bake that into level one of our values, or it can be, we'll get to there. Right now, we're just kind of keeping our head above water. When we mature a little bit, then we'll bring in that additional, how do we serve beyond ourselves?
So if someone here is looking to start a new business, have a product idea, business opportunity, whatever, how do you say you can't create culture, but how do you pre-design it, or how do you increase the probability of it occurring?
We build it on the framework of what are the values that this organization stands for.
Okay, so in this case, as a creation, be aspirational. But what do we want to be recognized as our values once we launch? Okay,
and if I can interject very quickly, my guess is some of the organizations you work with are misaligned on their values. They think they've got them set up, and then when you say what are they, and they're like, oh, we're all across the board, right? So.
Or they're on the website and they're hanging on the wall, but no one has
right. Yeah,
they are. They're never referenced or right.
Most organizations have written values.
Mm-hmm.
Very few organizations have values that have been well integrated.
Okay, so maybe to get to this point, what does a well integrated value look like?
It's got to have behaviors attached to it. So if I say our value is integrity, which I want to work with organizations that have integrity.
Sure.
But it's kind of table stakes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it really sets us apart. I'm not saying that if you...
Well, and I've always thought if you have to say you claim it, was there a problem?
Yes.
It's corrective action.
And so, in that, I want to think about in my marketplace, if it's local, national, global, whatever it is, I want to think about what is going to differentiate us in the marketplace, and I want my values to reflect that. So the best example I have of that is Southwest Airlines. There is no reason that an airline needs to be fun. It's not necessary for you to do what you need to do. Southwest chose fun because the founder, Herb Kelleher, was a
Fun
fun
guy.
guy,
Yeah.
a great leader and a fun person. And if you think about, let's say you want to sell your business, right? So if I've got a lot of employees or a few employees, one of the things that we worry about is if I sell to somebody, is the culture going to change? I want the values and the behaviors to be so integrated into your company that you're recruiting the next CEO to fit your culture versus having your culture be at risk of the new CEO coming.
Right.
So you're literally baking it into the hardwire. And, from the standpoint of fun, not only is that a distinction from a culture standpoint, and it helps you figure out, it really helps you decide who you want to hire, but also who would want to work for you.
Yes.
But then at the same point, that is also a brand strategy, because the greatest validation of your brand is that it is distinct and that its impact is just immeasurable. That you're literally doing something more than just getting me from point A to B.
Right. And so we were told, I was taught, and I believe it, that at Southwest when we worked there, and I still say we, I worked there 30 years.
Yeah.
So real quickly, there's two things that I think are an indicator on just incredible culture. One, do the people who leave still say we?
We.
And the second is the word love the verb used? Well, I loved when we did this at Southwest, or I loved working for this airline, versus I enjoyed it, or it was fun, or that kind of thing.
Right. Well, and Southwest is a love airline, so.
Exactly. But for any organization, man, I loved when I did that at HEB or whatever.
Right.
Yes. So when I worked there, when we worked there, what we were trying to build is something that was an airline, right? And Herb Kelleher would come in and say, forget that we're an airline.
Right.
We're not in the airline business. We're not in the transportation business. We're in the people business. We're thinking about us, because he said, if commercial aviation becomes something that we're in the future we don't do, we're still going to be about serving people and getting people to loved ones, getting people to events, getting people to places they need to be. And we worked with TGV. They were going to do a high-speed rail, and Southwest was going to be the high-speed rail carrier. We had mock-ups on the high-speed rail train and eminent domain, a lot of other things made it not possible at the time. But we were looking into not just being a commercial aviation carrier, but being a people carrier.
So in some ways, your culture really is product agnostic.
Yes. And when you think about your values standing the test of time and a new leader coming in, imagine Southwest. Herb Kelleher leaves, and some ogre comes in, and the fun is gone. They take that out of the flight attendant singing their announcements, and as frustrating as it can be, it's still a marker for, you're on a Southwest Airlines plane when.
Right.
If you take that away, you do start to lose the essence of who they are. And they're not for everybody. So that's the other thing to know. Every organization has a culture,
right,
by design or by default. Every organization has a brand.
Yeah, for sure.
By design or by default. And everyone...
And most are not universally attractive to everyone.
No, you're not going to be... You need to figure out who we are, who we attract. And I want to know who's not going to be a good fit for us, be they employee or customer, because let's love them out the door.
Well, what's universally attractive is vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream.
Correct.
Okay, and that's great. But if you want to enter the ice cream, you got to have one that makes it. But if that's all you do is just have a really good vanilla and chocolate ice cream, then how are you different than anyone else is?
Right.
Wow.
So, Delise, we've covered, essentially that you have not commoditized culture. You've said essentially it's emblematic of the people. It's either by design or by default. That environments dictate it, behaviors exhibit it. I define it. And I think one of the things that I'm sitting here thinking about, and perhaps some in our community are thinking about this, is that sounds great, but we got to run a business. That's fine, but I've got bills to pay. I've got suppliers and vendors, and I'm not Kelleher. Yeah, right. So can we pragmatize that to say, all right, because in our last episode, Delise said culture needs a budget, right? Sure. And I agree. Right. So very practically, what would you say to the solopreneur, the small business, the home services company, the accounting firm, whatever, that says, that sounds all well and good if you're Southwest and fun is your priority, but I've got to make a profit and these are hard economic times. So how would you maybe counsel me or one in our community who's us, right? Who's saying, yeah, that sounds soft. And I've challenged Ed playfully, like, yeah, that sounds soft. What does that really look like?
I think it's you mentioned a myth of culture. I think the biggest myth that I experience is that culture is soft.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree completely. Culture is about performance. Anybody any leader that wants to improve their culture, this isn't about having a hug circle and beating a bongo.
Pizzas on Friday.
Wearing whatever. If you want to do all that, that's fine. That's not your culture. So your culture is, what are the behaviors that work for us that attract top talent? Top talent doesn't want to go work for an A player, doesn't want to go work for a C organization.
Right.
A players want to work for A organizations. So I need to understand, who are we when we're at the top of our game, and how do I attract people that are going to want to come work for my organization, make it better, grow it. So that's the culture that's going to be what I call a legacy culture, where it stands the test of time. Now, you have a culture even if it's a terrible culture.
Right.
I mean, you have a culture whether you try to or not. Right? I mean, it exists. What's interesting about that is that, you infer that, A talent wants to work with A talent. Well, A talent typically is looking for accountability and looking for expectations.
Sure.
But if we were talking about the customer happiness feedback, I don't think, be more clear with your expectations of me with how you define happiness, but it is a leading indicator to culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, that what they're asking for. Say that again.
Yeah. So if I was saying I want to enjoy my job better, I mean, I'm not gonna walk in and say, hey, give me more expectations and put more pressure on me.
Right.
But in reality, a culture organization does have accountability. It does have clarity of purpose. It does have expectations.
Yeah. So there's a math equation behind what makes a job. It has a high motivation potential score. Mm-hmm. So you can score your job, and the job itself can be motivating. And two of the biggest factors for what makes a job, any job, more motivating is feedback and autonomy. So if I have some say-so over a little bit of my job, I find that job more motivating. If I get feedback from my job, I find that more motivating. So yes, that feedback, and what we find at the Culture Think Tank is that what people are asking for now more than ever is, tell me how I'm doing, and tell me how tell me the direction of the organization.
Right.
Yep.
So when we look at leaders, they say, "Oh, I tell them that all the time," and we look at the data and say, "Not enough."
Yeah.
So feedback and autonomy, is there also something in there about valuable hard work? And I mean that, the book, The Obstacle is the Way, some of the presumed sense is people want easy, and the reality is they don't. They actually benefit by some tension and friction.
Well, I'm quoting for the HR nerds out there, the Heckman model. So there's autonomy, there's feedback, and then the other three components. So this is 1/3, this is 1/3. The other three are a third. One, skill variety. I get to do different things in my job. One is task identification. I get to see the task from beginning to end. So if I create something, I get to see it all the way. And then finally is task significance. Does it matter?
Right.
Does what I do matter? So that's where I think you get into if I know that what I do matters, I'm making a difference.
Sure.
You share that with
Sure.
And I think that's one of my biggest experiences with leaders is I work in the nonprofit community, for-profit community, and we talk about know your why, whatever else. Let people know what good you're doing in the world. Let your employees know, sing that song.
Impact.
We made and if you remember, I'll date myself here too, in the 1980s, there would be television commercials, United, Southwest, and it was all the showing families getting together, and that's how does this airplane do something good?
Well, and we say sell the reward, not the product. And that really what you're talking about is that what is the benefit? What is the output? What is the ripple effect? What you're doing
for the employee?
Just that you have to have this reported in by 10 o'clock tomorrow or whatever. So contextualizing. So I got one question. You talked about autonomy, and And I've been struggling with the whole work from home, work in the office, that kind of stuff. And as you were talking through whatever the scientific framework was, is that I wonder if all this conversation about work from home is really more wrapped up in the autonomy dynamic.
Of course it is.
Certainly.
It is. And it's, I have fought corporate American leaders before COVID, the entirety of my career, that same and equal, fair and equal are not the same, right? Fair and equal are different.
I hate the word fair.
There are times when people have needed to work from home, wanted to work from home, and I've staunchly encouraged leaders, exercise some fairness here.
So how do you define fairness?
So what I would want to think is, there might be a time when my child is sick, my parent needs help, I need to come in different hours, and that's not equal. So equal and fair are two different things. And I mean, I taught my kids that. Like, the younger one would say, "That's not fair. She needs to stay up later." I'm like, you don't want equal, dude. It's fair.
Okay. Yeah. But there's this whole, like, maybe it's a myth, but that whole HR thing that if you do it for one employee, you have to do it for all.
You don't. You actually don't.
Okay.
But if you can show fairness in your practices and your policies, then we can be different. So I absolutely believe that the new color of leadership is gray.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, there's a whole another episode.
There is. Well, and we're nearing time. I think, Delise, one thing I'd like to understand is for folks in our community who are listening, who may be saying, like, geez, on my best day, we're a C. What? My gosh, like, we're not an A. Like, I aspire to that, and maybe that leader has debunked the myth that culture is fluff, and that it is actually performance, and there are actually metrics, and there are how can one begin to diagnose or take action even from this conversation, which has been super rich? What are maybe one or two takeaways to say, hey, these would be the two things, like these are the symptoms that you're off the rails. These are the symptoms that you are getting ready to go over the ledge. What might those telltale symptoms be? And then what one or two things could somebody do to say, I'm going to do this now?
Well, it might be your profitability is going down. So, I mean, if we're not performing the way we need to perform, I would want to know, is that a cultural phenomenon? So what's happening? And then I want to talk to employees, even if I just have a couple. I want to know about how employees experience the internal culture and how they experience the culture with the customer. They've got more information than we often give them credit for.
Right.
We think that the culture building piece, the values building piece, is a senior leadership exercise that we should go do off by ourselves. No, that's a total organizational activity. Come together. I don't care if there are 3 people or 3,000 people. Get a cross-section of them, bring them together, have them help us know, what do we value, what's working here, what's not, versus leadership coming in and saying, oh, by the way, these are your new values. They're not, they're yours.
Yeah.
I didn't create them. So I wanted to bring everyone together. And then again, it's not what makes us happy, what makes us feel good. It's what do we do best that helps us to perform at our peak.
Wow. That's magnificent.
It's awesome.
Delise Simmons, we are honored that we get to spend time again learning from you. This has been
the last time. I'm thinking.
Absolutely. This has been magnificent. For those in our community who are listening, where can somebody go to learn more about you, the Culture Think Tank, and what is this little book you have in front of you?
Well, I just published Preamble Leadership, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's inexpensive and a quick read, and can really help create a framework. I built it after the Constitution, the preamble of the Constitution, so easy to read, fun, and www.theculturethinktank.com. So the Culture Think Tank is where I am, the work that we do, and we'd love to talk to you.
We are indebted to you for giving us your wisdom, our community your wisdom, and so thank you. It has been a great joy. I've learned a lot.
No doubt.
And every time we wrap up this podcast, we say the same thing.
We do, but we ask questions first.
Oh my gosh, we do.
Yeah, it's a new thing. This is our first guest, episode 2.
She has actually already answered these questions.
The first one, so she's answered the questions if she can answer it twice.
You're right.
So 2 questions. First, if there was one food, guilt-free, allergen-free, calorie-free, that you could have the rest of your life, you wanted 2 choices in the first episode. We only get you one because, that's the rules. So second option, first was, by the way,
Coconut cream pie. That's off the board now.
Yeah, that's right. So second food item, if coconut cream pie is all consumed.
It's all consumed. So a South Texas girl likes chips and guac. I eat my weight in chips and guac.
Yeah.
So
It's protein, right?
Yeah. It's a good fat. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Awesome. Well, then that's good to know. And then second is, if you had one more thing just to share with the world that if you look at your legacy, your impact, and say, you know what I would love for people to take away from spending time with me would be X. What would it be?
It's something that Herb Kelleher said to us, and it's going to sound a little bit trite, but he would say it all the time, and that he would mete it out to take yourself not so seriously and take your work very seriously. But too many times we catch ourselves thinking it's about us and taking ourselves so seriously. Have fun. This is a short ride. The time is precious. So take your work very seriously and
don't take yourself so seriously.
Love it.
That's magnificent.
That's woo.
That is woo. Ed, every time we do wrap up, after we do our questions with
that's
guests,
right.
We conclude one way, and Delise, we invite you to do it again with us, and with conviction. That is that everyone wants woo. Until next time, we look forward to spending time with you on the Wonder of Woo podcast. Y'all take care.
Thanks. So that's it for today's episode of the Wonder of Woo. Head on over to Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to subscribe to our show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on Apple Podcasts will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Daryl and me. Be sure to head on over to the wonderofwoopodcast.com and pick up a free copy of our gift. And please join us next time.